Just a reminder, you know who you are. Be at General Sam's tonight. What, 6-ish? 6 to 6:15. Look nice, look presentable. No jeans.
Oh crap! It's on the top.
Okay, that's where.
9-ish, 9:30-ish ballpark, something like that.
That's when it'll be done.
Really?
They have a game.
I know, but I was told it was moved up.
No,
Roll didn't do it.
softball.
It's the same.
Oh, that's too bad. Oh, well, do what you can.
You have like a long hair.
I know. I saw that.
Coming
I
out.
want it to be there. It's my friend.
No, it's like on your shirt. It's not. No, it's on up here.
Back,
Up here.
back, farther, back, right
Oh,
there.
oh,
Tanya.
All
right. Oh, phone's away. Really very away. Very super away. So let's see. About 12 of you did the extra credit Kia that was due Friday. Great. There's another one that's due this Friday. If you are one of these people that actually checks your grade on a different campus, you might notice that, hey, suddenly you're missing assignments. No, you're not. You're not missing anything. It does not hurt your grade. It doesn't affect your grade at all. It just looks like it is, but it really isn't. You'll just have to trust me. How are we doing on your fourth quarter paper? Is that progressing?
It's not a thing.
It's not a. Yes, it is.
not yet.
They are intentionally that way, because this is. If you haven't figured it out, this fourth quarter paper is so sweet, sort of a culminating thing, right? It's sort of your capstone project, especially those of you doing the A1. You have to look at all year. Now, if you're one of these people doing the B1, the culmination is, can you take an entire document, not one that I've pared down? Can you take the entire document, find it yourself? Find arguments yourself. That's your capstone.
We have documents. We don't. We have to find them.
Sure you can.
B papers have documents. Oh, okay.
Any questions?
Remember that.
Today's the 13th. Your exam window is next week. So we have basically this week and Monday to get through both George Bush's, Clinton, Obama, and start addressing this thing called Trumpism. And we shall do it.
Wait, I have a question. What day
Next
is the
Tuesday.
paper due?
23rd.
So Thursday.
Yeah.
At what time? Like night or like?
Thursday.
Wait. That's when the paper's
Wednesday.
due.
Whatever the 23rd is. So let's take a look at exactly what Iran-Contra was. This was during the Reagan presidency.
I think
Are you supposed to be able to read that?
You don't have to read it. Those are missiles. It's a large missile.
Why is it one?
At this time, so 1980s, there was this country called Iran and this other country called Iraq. And they were fighting against each other for access to oil in the Middle East. And what the U.S. did was supply weapons to both. Actually, we supplied tanks to one and anti-tank missiles to the other. Business was good. The problem was, though, that the U.S. Congress had said you can't do this. You cannot support Iran. Remember, Iran was the country that had a radical Muslim Islamic revolution, and the U.S. really didn't understand what was going on, and so this gets complicated. So the Reagan administration sold missiles to Iran, who were using those missiles against Iraq, which is underneath the arrow. But the money that was made in the selling of the weapons was diverted to a group called the Contras, which were in Central America. The Contras were a group trying to overthrow a communist government in Central America. Right? This is all very convoluted and complicated. It's much more complicated than this simplistic slide makes it. But just understand that the United States was selling weapons to Iran. taking the profits and diverting them to this group in Central America that was trying to overthrow a communist government. The problem with it is that this was illegal. The U.S. Congress had specified any sort of support for the Contras. Yes, they were anti-communist, but it was people. So the U.S. Congress specifically said, do not support this group in any way, and this was illegal. And this was the guy that was the driver. His name is Oliver North. It's kind of interesting because Oliver North was just in the news last week. Anyone ring a bell what Oliver North was involved in last week? He's still alive. Oliver North was just removed as the president of the National Rifle Association. Because I don't know why, but anyway, he's still around. That also tells you, by the way, that he's not in prison, even though he clearly broke the law. And you might wonder, well, how is he not in prison? Anyone want to take a guess here? He was pardoned. Very good. He was pardoned for what he did.
Ford strikes again.
Well, it wasn't Ford, right? And as part of the deal also is, remember those hostages that Iran had? They let them go. You sell us weapons, we'll let go of your hostages. And then the profits were given to this group fighting communists in Nicaragua. It actually is kind of brilliant. The problem is it's illegal. And I suppose you could argue, well, then Reagan was Rosa-ing. I guess. Reagan, his presidency ended before the trial for Oliver. This was caught. It was all discovered somehow, the press, the liberal media. And he was caught, and he was put on trial, and he was sentenced, and then he was pardoned by the next president. This identifies one of the kind of, I don't know if the word flaw is the right word, but when the president can pardon, does that enable him to just have people under him do whatever they want, and then when they're caught, he'll just pardon them? Right? Is that a flaw in the system, the constitutional system? And we're even seeing it somewhat today, where the current president has basically thrown out that if anyone is convicted for illegal activities, he'll just pardon them. Is that a flaw? I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying that's up there. And this had a negative effect on Reagan. Reagan was an extremely popular president, and then this came out, and he took a bit of a popularity hit.
Who's the president that we're writing about in the Blue Book?
Reagan. Yeah. Oh, this is absolutely, positively evidence that you could use arguing that Reagan was or wasn't a good president. Right? Iran-Contra is his Watergate. Every president lately seems to have a Watergate. In fact, there's this theory that ever since Kennedy, that the American public looks for every president's Watergate. I mean, Kennedy had to go and get himself shot, fail. And then Lyndon Johnson, his failure with Vietnam, fail. And then Nixon had Watergate. Nixon's Watergate was Watergate. Ford fell a lot. And he pardoned, right? Carter had Iran-Contra. Carter had the hostage thing. Reagan had Iran-Contra. George Bush Sr. had he basically lied. He said he would not raise taxes, then he did. And George Bush Jr. had the Second Persian Gulf War, which was built on false information, and Clinton had Monica Lewinsky, and Trump is Trump, and I mean it just doesn't end, right? We're not watching it. Okay. Again, I would argue that what we're going over today is useful for those of you writing the Blue Book essay on Reagan. It's also useful as far as liberal conservative. Reagan was conservative. We're gonna try and figure out what's going on in this example of the 400-meter dash, right? So before I explain it, let's see if we can kind of figure out what's going on. So this is a metaphor. This ran in newspapers, and you can see that it's a race between three people, right? And look at lane one and try and identify who that is. I don't mean specifically. I mean, who does that person represent is what I'm asking. And then go to lane 2. And then that poor person in lane 3. Okay. Any insight? Go ahead.
The lane 1 person's kind of like average, middle to high class business.
What race?
White
What gender?
male.
College educated? Of course, he's a white male. He must be college educated. Okay, fine. And do you notice what lane he's in? He's in the inside track, right? Look at all those hurdles he has to overcome in the race of success, the race of life. Look at all those rocks that are in his way and those street barrier things. Look at all those things he had to overcome. There aren't any. Got built-in advantages. He's a white male. That's 2 advantages in America, according to this. Okay, we can skip the middle one for now. Let's just go to the other one. I mean, not only apparently there's grass and there's a hole there. Holy mackerel!
Pun intended.
What?
What? Pun intended. You said holy mackerel and there's a
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. And so this is a political
I
cartoon
thought that was funny.
arguing in favor of affirmative action. Affirmative action is kind of a leveling of the playing field. Let's help the people that have some sort of disadvantage, whether it's poverty or facing racism or whatever. Let's help them. And so affirmative action was put into place, but there were lawsuits, and here are 2 lawsuits that existed. And in both cases, what happened was white guys got passed over for either a job or admission to some sort of a school, and they sued. So what they're arguing is it's not affirmative action is racist. You're fighting racism with more racism. And the net decision, what the court said was, you're right. You're right. It did not end affirmative action, but what it did say was, hey, person who chose the black kid to go to UCLA instead of the white kid, you need to do a better job of explaining why you chose the black kid over the white kid. It can't just be, well, because he's black. There's got to be more. There has to be a higher standard in order to justify affirmative action. That's the net result. Affirmative action, which is taking race into consideration, needs to, you got to make sure that you're addressing an actual hurdle in order to justify taking minorities over other people. Okay, that's a it is an attack against affirmative action. It's making affirmative action less likely to be used by schools. Okay. The second major topic that Reagan tackled, not personally tackled, but what addressed was abortion. And you're looking at a chart which identifies what are called late-term abortions. Can anyone remind us, what is the law of the land right now? What was the Supreme Court case that established a precedent about abortion? What is it? What's the name of the case? The name of the case that legalized abortion in the United States. Roe v. Wade. Okay, there you go. Roe v. Wade. And do you recall what specifically did it legalize? Roe v. Wade legalized what? All abortion?
Within 24 weeks.
Yeah, okay. Within the first 24 weeks-ish, 6 months about, no state can bar abortion in any way. After 6 months, states can put up hurdles for what are called late-term abortions. From outright banning them to you have to wait 48 hours Like, so let's say you're pregnant, you don't want to be pregnant, you want to terminate pregnancy for whatever reason. You go to the clinic. The clinic in some states can say, well, here's a brochure, see you in 2 days. They can make you wait. That's a hurdle. Some states have said, absolutely not, unless you've been raped or you are the victim of incest or delivering baby might medically be risky, then okay. But other than those three things, no. Right? That states can do that after the first 6 months. And what you're looking at is a map of the United States and how each state deals with various levels of abortion. And so you've got something called viability. So these yellow states, once the fetus, I'm just going to use the word fetus. I'm sorry to offend any of you who think it's a baby. I'm not saying it's not a baby or a person. I'm just going to say fetus. Okay. The yellow states are once it's viable. Once it's viable, you got to leave that thing alone. So 24 weeks generally. I'm not sure what the difference is between that and third trimester. It doesn't really matter. You don't need to memorize this map. What I am showing you, though, is, yep, we got it. Roe v. Wade, that's the one that says states cannot put up any hurdles during the first 6 months. And now we've got a second case. It's called Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And that's the Supreme Court case that says, well, states can put up hurdles as long as those hurdles do not present an undue burden. An undue burden. What does that mean? Yes. Maybe. Anyone else want to take a shot? States can put up hurdles as long as those hurdles are not an undue burden. What does that mean? That's not a bad guess. Yes.
Like it's going to add more problems.
Okay, there you go. Does it cause a great deal of problems, whatever that hurdle is? For example, let's say this is actually true. South Dakota has, I believe this is true, one abortion clinic in the entire state of South Dakota. And it's right on the South Dakota-Minnesota border. And it's open on weekends only because no doctor in South Dakota is employed at this clinic. It's a group of Minnesota doctors who go there on the weekends. So it's only open on the weekends in South Dakota. And it's located in extreme eastern South Dakota. Okay? Well, if you are an 18-year-old pregnant teenager and you are by the Black Hills, right? You're on the complete other side and you take that drive. I'm not sure how many hours that is. Let's just say 5-hour drive. Let's say it's 5-hour drive. You drive all the way to the clinic, which is open on weekends. And then they say to you, I'm sorry, you have to wait 48 hours to do this. Here, read this. Okay. So you have to wait 48 hours. If it's Saturday, that means you can come back Monday. But they're not open on Monday. So you have to go back to your work and then you have to come back the following week. Well, what if you're poor? What if you can't afford to just take a road trip every weekend? Is that an undue burden? Maybe. Okay. Georgia, I just told you that Georgia just passed a law that created a heartbeat. It's called the heartbeat law. Is that an undue burden? See, what happens is that states will pass laws as aggressively as they can to challenge Roe v. Wade and see if they can get Roe v. Wade overturned. Go ahead.
Why don't they just go to a different state?
Sure. Why don't they just go to a different state? Why don't you just hop in a plane and fly to a different state?
No, like if she's on the other side, why don't you just go to Montana?
Yeah. What you're looking at over here are some of the most conservative states in the nation, right? Where it's unlikely. Minnesota is a fairly liberal state as far as abortion is concerned. Okay. You are looking at the two Supreme Court decisions, though, that sort of dictate American policy on abortion. Roe v. Wade says states cannot put up any hurdles before 24 weeks. But then Planned Parenthood v. Casey says, well, yeah, they can, as long as those hurdles are not crazy difficult. And so you have Georgia last weekend passing the heartbeat law. Well, someone's going to challenge it, right? This is the way our system works. Someone's going to challenge that law and say that law that allows for no abortions after 6 weeks is an undue burden, and as a result violates Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And we'll see. We'll see if the court agrees that that is an undue burden, or will the court say, well, that's not an undue burden. That's a reasonable conclusion, and the courts can do that. As you know, courts can change their mind. Any questions here? Good stuff for a Reagan was a good president or a liberal conservative point of view. Let's keep going. I believe this is our last slide for today. Reagan goes off, he retires, he runs for 2 terms, he wins both terms, and his vice president, George Bush Sr., is elected president. Remember now, the Cold War's over. Cold War's over. There is no more Soviet Union. They're gone. All these Istans, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan, and Azerbaijanistan, and all these things. I made that up. There is no more Soviet Union. There is no more Soviet military influence. The Soviets have withdrawn. Well, think about it. If you are a cop and you show up at a house because of a domestic disturbance and the domestic disturbance isn't there anymore, do you hang around? No, you go home. With the withdrawal of the Soviet Union, the Americans also withdrew in large part from intervening in global affairs because what for? It's the end of history. Remember the college presentation that we went to the U of M for? It's the end of history. We've done it. There's no more global concern anymore. Hooray! And so the end of the Soviet Union and the withdrawal, not complete withdrawal, but the large-scale withdrawal of American military forces allows for something that was there before to reemerge, to fester, right? You can't stand your brother, but your mom is there and sitting between you. And so you're nice to each other. And then the phone rings. She has to get up and answer the phone. Now it's time to rumble. Let's go. That is Iraq.
Are you sure?
And that little green thing right there, that is a country called Kuwait. Okay. Remember now, there's no American military force to prevent this. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Iraq invaded Kuwait. Now, this is not Iraqi history, so you might be wondering, what does this have to do with U.S. history? A lot. Okay. First question we're going to answer, why? Why did Iraq invade Kuwait? Now, some of you took World of Conflict, so you can share with us some of your brilliance. Go ahead. Very good, right? A lot of water access. Water is trade. The more access you have to water, the more ports you can have. The more ports you can have, the more you can export. Access to water is beneficial. It's one reason why the U.S. is so successful, right? Look at all those oceans we border. That's trade, okay? Anything else? What's the leading consumer product in the Middle East? Oil, yep. Kuwait has a lot of oil.
I know, I didn't know.
Iraq wanted to take over that oil so that they commercially benefit from selling that oil. Anyone else? I sort of hinted at maybe the main reason. Let me ask this. Why then? Why invade in 1990? Why not in 1985 or 1980 or 1970? Why then? Very good. There was no American military presence to prevent it. Mom went to answer the phone. That's why you punched your brother, because mom wasn't there. So the timing was right. Also, one other thing that I think is a major reason, and that is because Iraq didn't think Kuwait should have been in existence in the first place. Kuwait was created after World War I. Iraq was created after World War I. And what the victorious countries of World War I did was took the Ottoman Empire. This is all Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire lost. So what they did was they took the Ottoman Empire and split it into countries. But what do the British know, or what do the French know, or what, frankly, do the Americans know about tribes in the Middle East? You think a tribe is divided by that incredibly straight line? That on one side there was one tribe, and on the other side of this random line was a different tribe? No, they did it based on geography. Look, a river. Hey, a tree. Let's make countries based on that river and that tree. Not the tree, literally, I'm exaggerating there. So what they did was they took these people who are ethnically the same group of people. These are all Arabs. Magic line here is right there. To the right of this magic line right here, these people are Persian. These people are Arab. But they didn't want to create a country called Arabistan because that's what the Ottoman Empire was, and the Ottoman Empire causes war. So we don't want one thing, Arab land, that's powerful. We want a bunch of little things, little countries that are weak. And so they created this thing called Kuwait, which the Iraqis thought, well, that's stupid. You should have never created Kuwait. They should have been part of Iraq. Plus access to the Persian Gulf, plus oil, plus no Americans equals invasion. At this time, 1990, I was right there. I was in Italy for a year, and I can remember being downtown Rome. So the cool thing about studying in foreign countries is instead of looking at the Colosseum in a book, you're in the Colosseum, right? Which is pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
So I can remember we happened to be at the Colosseum that day. And the class was over. We're just hanging out, waiting for the bus to pick us up. And everyone smoked back then. So the professor's just smoking a heater. You know, he's pretty cool. And we were just hanging out, waiting for the bus. And one of the other people in the class happened to look down this road. So there's the Colosseum, and then down this road, and noticed that there was smoke in the distance. And he says, "Hey, professor, what's that?" And the professor looks, look at that. And it was pretty far, so we really couldn't tell what was going on.
You saw smoke in Iran.
No, we weren't in Iran. We were in Italy.
Yeah, but you.
Yeah. So anyway, we're just hanging out, and we're starting to hear chanting, right? Chanting. And I'm sitting there looking and trying to see what was going on, and then I did this. And at that point, the bus was there. The professor was leaning out the door, and he said this. He said, "Remember, boys, you're from Canada." The bus door shuts, and he leaves. And we're standing there. What did he say? It's something about Canada. We're from Canada. And, we're sitting there like, but we're not from Canada. We're Americans. Wait, maybe what he's saying is important. Anyway, I'll cut to what the point was. This was the largest anti-American rally in Europe since World War II. They were protesting the American reaction to what Iraq did to Kuwait. And I haven't told you what happened yet, but this was a huge protest. And they were burning American flags. That's why the guy told us we were from Canada. You might ask also, why didn't he let you on the bus? Which is what I wanted to know. Anyway, we were fine. We said we were from Canada, and Minnesota, close enough, right? Oh, yeah, you're in Canada? Where? Minnesota. Oh, yeah. Anyway, we were fine. I saw a hand up.
I was just wondering why you didn't get in the bus.
Because it left. The American response was because we believed that if Iraq was attacking Kuwait in an effort to unify Arab lands, that Saudi Arabia was next, right? Saudi Arabia is also Arab. So we sent 500,000 American soldiers to Saudi Arabia and put them right on this line, in anticipating that Iraq was going to invade Saudi Arabia next in an effort to unify Arab countries and create Arabistan. Okay. This is sort of interesting because maybe you know this or maybe you don't, but Saudi Arabia is the land of two cities, Mecca and Medina. There's Mecca and there's Medina. Anyone know about those two cities? They're very important to Islam. Those are the two cities of Islam. Mecca is where Muhammad lived. And the presence of non-Muslims, American soldiers, now were some of those Americans Muslim? Sure. But most Americans are either not religious at all or Christian. The presence of non-Muslims in Muslim land made a lot of these people really angry, especially one guy in particular. Who?
Mason.
That guy's name is Osama bin Laden. He is busy over here in Afghanistan fighting to establish a government in Afghanistan after the Soviets had withdrawn. Osama bin Laden offered Saudi Arabia his military organization. Now, notice I didn't say army because Al-Qaeda is not an army. They do not represent a country, but they are a military organization. They have thousands of fighters. And they offered Saudi Arabia, hey, don't let the Americans into your country. We'll help protect you. And so now you're Saudi Arabia. You have a choice between the best military on earth. The problem is they're not Muslim. Or this quasi-military organization that did successfully fight the Soviets in Afghanistan, and they're Muslim. Which way do you go? The Saudis picked the Americans. That made this group angry. You are looking at the reason why 9/11 occurred. This is the reason why 9/11 occurred, because of American military presence in Muslim lands.
Do you blame Iraq then? Because Iraq invaded Kuwait, and
Well, I suppose you
and
could
then
think that. Okay, so the American response was to send soldiers to Saudi Arabia, and then from there they invaded Kuwait and liberated Kuwait. And they were ready to invade Iraq itself. They told Iraq, we're coming. And this was not a fair fight, by the way. It was a completely lopsided fight. Okay?
wait, the U.S. liberated.
Kuwait. And basically, the United States told Iraq, we're coming unless you do three things. You need to do three things. If you do these three things, we will not invade Iraq. Does anyone know what the three things were? No.
Don't bomb.
No.
Don't.
Interestingly enough, no is the answer to that one. No, they didn't have hostages. Okay,
Don't.
give up any claim to Kuwait. Very good. Yes.
Didn't they have a dictator?
Yes, they did.
And they wanted him to step down.
No. That is interesting. That one of the qualifications for an American invasion was not get rid of your leader. He retained power. His name was Saddam Hussein. He retained power. Okay, so we have one of them so far. Give up any claims to any lands beyond Iraq itself. Just stay within the borders that were established by the Treaty of Versailles, World War I. Deal. The second was to allow uninterrupted access to the entire country for weapons inspections teams from the United Nations. And you know what they were looking for?
Missiles.
Weapons of mass destruction, WMDs. Because there had been some evidence that Iraq was developing some weapons of mass destruction programs. So allow the UN to inspect your whole country for, now there are three types of WMDs: nuclear, chemical, and biological. Nuclear, chemical, biological. Deal. Now, this is important. Iraq said deal. Iraq is going to allow for uninterrupted UN access to any facility, military facility, government facility, anything. Deal.
Wait, who agreed to that?
Iraq. So that means, think about it. That means that if a UN inspection team shows up and says, we'd like to search that building, and Iraq says no, that they're violating, and the U.S. was then authorized to then invade Iraq. Which, of course, is exactly what happened in 2003, but we're skipping ahead. Okay, and then the third one is a little bit complex, but here's Iraq. You see it? Imagine a line cutting into thirds. So draw two lines across Iraq about a third of the way. One right there and one right there. Okay, just draw two lines across Iraq.
Give up claims.
About a third of the way for each one. Okay. The Iraqi military was not allowed north of the line up here or south of the line down here. No Iraqi military allowed north of the north line or south of the south line. Yeah, in a way, right? Synthesis.
What?
And I'm wondering if anyone knows what's going on. It's okay. This was now some of you have said, didn't the U.S. try and get rid of the leader of Iraq? This was a sort of attempt. The northern third of Iraq is full of a distinct group of people called Kurds. That's a specific ethnic group. It's called Kurds. They're in Iraq, but they're called Kurds. They're Kurdish Iraqis, not cheese. No. The Kurds actually represent a group of people that some of the Kurds are in Iran, some of them are in Turkey, Syria, but they don't have their own country. So instead of being a majority in their own country, they're a minority in several countries. Well, if you draw a line and you say no Iraqi military allowed north of that line, what you're basically doing is telling the Kurds, rebel, secede. They can't stop you. If they try to stop you, they've violated the terms of the agreement, and we, the U.S., could invade. Same thing. The southern line represents another group of people. They're called Shiites. Careful. They're called Shiites. The leader of Iraq was a Sunni. So understand that Iraq was divided into three groups: Kurds, Sunnis, and Shiites. Now in a way, I'm kind of not being fair with you because Kurds an ethnic group and these two are religious groups. But it's okay.
You spell Shiites?
Kurd, Sunni, Shiite. Shiite is S-H-I space I-T-E. Shiite. You are a piece of Shiite. Thank you.
Wait, S-H-I space I-T-E.
I-T-E. Yep. Same thing. Hey, Shiites, go ahead and rebel. The government cannot do anything about it. If they do, they're violating the terms of the agreement, and the U.S. could conceivably invade and take care of business.
Wait, what was the third person? Kurds, Shiites, and
Sunnis.
how do you spell that one?
S-U-N-N-I-S. So in terms of ceasefire, uninterrupted UN inspections, no military north or south of two lines. That's what this no-fly zone means. And for 10 years, this was the focus of the U.S. military. Now let's do math. This agreement was signed in 1991. Add 10.
Skip to September.
Very good. Okay. I'm telling you that American focus was on, is Iraq violating these things? Well, they are. Well, then let's just do an airstrike. For 10 years, the U.S. enforced these conditions. Our focus was on Iraq. And then 9/11 happened. And 9/11 was like supposedly this bolt out of the blue. I've been trying to teach you that no, it wasn't. That we had rubbed elbows with this way of thinking, with the Iranian Revolution, with the Iran hostage crisis, with the killing of those Marines in Lebanon. They're all from the same group of people. That 9/11 should not have been this shocking event. I don't know about should have seen it coming, but it was just the latest in a series of events, not this totally out of the blue attack from a group of people that we never had a problem with before. Yeah, we did. It's just we just didn't really understand it. Okay. Any questions?
Is there more?
There's not more. Okay, good. I think those computers are ours if you need them. There's Kias you could do. There's
Paper.
paper you could do. Some of you have essays you can still do. What the crap? Hi. I'll go get them.
He's Rosa.